So I'm here to wrap up after observation, and I've provided feedback. I'm here to wrap up with Miss Jones, our post observation and feedback. And Miss Jones, now that we have gone through this unit and we've had some individual coaching with amongst ourselves, what went well in the lesson? Tell me what worked best with your lesson on having the students become independent and proficient readers.
Well, I'm excited to say it worked very well. I use the one thing we could do is they learned a variety of steps with the 20 days of independent reading. And when they did the 20 days of independent reading, one thing that they really learned about is how to choose a just right book and to understand exactly what will help them to move, understanding that the Lexile level is very important and that the more they read, the more their level of reading will increase. And the other way that I can actually measure that is not just by their word, but by using a variety of informal assessments as well as formal. But the informal assessments are pretty much the ones when they do their reading status log and they have to go back and they have to put all this information, like telling me things that demonstrate their comprehension level, giving me the main points, telling me who was introduced at this point, giving me good feedback in terms of also learning how to write a good constructed response, which is going to be required on the Georgia milestones. So just helping them to practice those strategies and skills that are going to be applicable to them when they take the assessment as well as a life skill, because we don't teach to the test, we just teach them things to help them to be able to be successful on that test and any other test they take that require constructed response.
Okay, so let's look at our next question. What was successful that you were able, what or how were you able to check the students' understanding? How or what were you able to do to check the students' understanding? What were some of the ways that you used to check their understanding?
Well, some of the ways that I use, like of course I told you earlier about the sticky notes and doing the annotation with the sticky notes, asking the children to do a variety of the mind map. Okay. The mind map was very good in terms of when they were reading and just being able to put their thoughts and show, and they got a chance to visualize and see exactly how their thoughts were being organized when they were as they were reading. So they were able to make direct connections. One thing that's been very, very, very helpful was when they have when they're able to explain what they think is going on, being able to make predictions.
One of the things that I liked the most when your students were actually reading, one of your depth of knowledge questions, you told them to recreate the ending of the story. So that took a lot of different applications, synthesis, those knowledge, all those different levels. That's what it took for the student to be able to recreate the ending of the story, because they had to understand first the plot line, the character traits. And so that's how I was able to observe how they were proficient readers. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, I was going to say the conference. Okay. I cannot tell you, the conference is the best way to assess the children because you get a myriad of information from them, whether they know it or don't know it, and it's more intimate. I love the conference.
Okay, so let's look at our next question. How do you know that your instruments are free of bias? How do you know that your instruments are free of bias?
Well, you can't. Some assessments you can't be free of bias. Like when they do the star reading test, that test is made up by the state, so I have no hand in that one. But the test that I make up, I try to make sure that if I have to indulge with some culture, I try to make sure my selections are centered around the different cultures in my classroom. Like one selection might be from this particular culture, and then I'll try to get one for the other one, and just to kind of make sure that everybody can make a connection to the test if I have to use that. But I try to avoid using any cultural selections. But for nonfiction text, that's kind of like a given. You're going to have to use some type of culture to for some at some point.
But what I did like was that you did give them a checklist on where they were to be in their reading. So that way you said, okay, by this day, this is where you are to be in your reading. And, you know, you explain to them the different genres. And then you said tracking my thoughts you have on the board. Tracking my thoughts, what does that look like? So as they were reading, they were able to annotate their thoughts. And those, to me, that's a way to become free of bias, because those thoughts are what provoke them and propel them through their books.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you were being very observant in my classroom. I like that.
So let's go to the...
paying attention.
Let's go to the next question. What do you have here? Would you say your assessments are valid? Would you say your assessments are valid?
Oh, yeah. I would definitely say that my tests were valid because they measure what I tell them. What I tell the kids they're going to measure, the tests measure that. I don't have anything additional. I don't have any trick questions, any spot questions. I told them we're going to talk about this particular skill, and that's what I assessed them on. And also, when I do the other test questions, I usually try to make sure my questions are based on the depth of knowledge, and which is inclusive of whatever the standard says. Like, for example, the standard R10 says that they're going to read and they're going to become, they're going to be able to read and comprehend nonfiction and literary texts independently and proficiently. As you see, my standard of learning is definitely relative to that, because I still have the words independent and proficient readers in my daily conversation, and the kids are hearing that constantly. So the standard is relative, and I try to put a depth of knowledge question and try to gravitate. I don't want to just everything, because of course you can't start everything at the DOK 4. You've got to start at the first level in order for you to graduate, elevate to that next level. So the kids, the construction part of it, and the construction and the content. And I said construction because I'm talking about building the question. But I know it's known as construct validity. I'm not an idiot. I just want you to know I do know the term. I'm just letting you know that I'm construction in terms of building up from the bottom up. Yes. And that's what that DOK will do. You're supposed to build those levels up. A lot of people get that confused, and they think they're only supposed to talk from the DOK 4. Everything got to be high level. Everything is, yes, you want to build them to high level, but you got to start somewhere.
Right, and measure what the construct is, the norm students.
Start at the bottom that we hear.
Okay.